What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the channel. We're having a lot of fun this offseason, kind of looking at this or that player versus, and we've been really doing rookie drafts. But now we're going to be diving into Dynasty, kind of looking at guys that we'd rather have at current ADP in either startups or if you're in a league based on value, who would you rather have? And hey, we want to swing out the gate. Let's get these truthers on there because truthers are on both sides. Puka Nacua versus Garrett Wilson. Both of these guys have those truthers that are out there. And you know what? Like many expected Garrett Wilson to kind of have that Puka season the last couple of years. It just hasn't been in the cards. Puka obviously had that phenomenal year last year as a rookie. So who you want to rather have? And we're looking at keep trade cut and value. And again, we don't look at keep trade cut as being the end all be all of all things, but it does dictate kind of player value right now. Puka's at wide receiver 6. Garrett Wilson's at wide receiver 7. So they are going very, very close in terms of value. And then when you look at ADP, you're really determining between these two guys. Now, 209 is Puka Nacua's ADP at wide receiver 6. Garrett Wilson's at 211, wide receiver 7. There might be a running back kind of smudged in there, a couple quarterbacks, but wide receiver 7. So really, if you want a wide receiver in this round at the back end of the second round, you are looking at Garrett Wilson versus Puka, and who are you taking? That's why I think this is a fun argument, and that's why I think it's fun to kind of pick between these two guys. We're going to start with Puka. Chris is going to talk about kind of what he did last year. Obviously, a lot of people know that, and just kind of give us our outlook for this next year.
Yeah, so big rookie year, unprecedented rookie year. Should have probably won rookie of the year, but CJ Stroud exists. But 160 targets, 105 receptions, almost 1,500 yards, 6 touchdowns. Really good PFF receiving grades. Was essentially a chess piece for this Rams offense, and something that it really helped that Cooper Kupp missed some time last year. He didn't miss a lot of time, but when he was out there, there were times where he just wasn't very healthy. And it was pretty clear that Puka Nacua was the go-to in those situations. Overall, I don't know how you can replicate a season like that. Because when you turn on the film, and Puka truthers are going to get really upset with me right now, but when you turn on the film, Puka is very much so a product of the scheme and a product of the system and feeding him targets. I'm not discrediting what he did. I don't think that just any player could get 1,500 yards in this system, but I do think that this system knows how to use wide receivers well. We saw Tutu Atwell have some big games last year. Puka is one of these big-bodied wide receivers that can win contested catches, but he does a lot more than that in terms of they get him the ball in space. They let him be a yak threat. And I think that that's where he's a strong player, is when you can get him the ball in space, let him kind of work his magic after the catch. When you look at what the depth chart looks like for his dynasty outlook, you're looking at Cooper Kupp maybe having 1 or 2 more years. We say that normally, like, historically good wide receivers last a little bit longer, but we're already starting to see the decline of Cooper Kupp. And right now, I would have it projected as Puka Nacua as the wide receiver 1 over Cooper Kupp at this moment. And so you're looking at, I think you're looking at maybe not 1,500 yards, but I still think you're looking at a very, very good fantasy wide receiver that's going to score a ton of points. I think Matthew Stafford still has every bit of it in his repertoire. He makes every throw. He did it all season last year. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And so you look at Puka Nacua, you're feeling pretty good about his outlook for 2024 and beyond. We'll get into the age stuff a little bit later, but like Puka's already in that a little bit older than other prospects. He was an older prospect. There's a reason he went on day 3, but we'll talk about that as we get to this.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at overall just Puka's numbers, I mean, 29% target share, that's where the fantasy points came from. Dude just got targeted, and they didn't really make a massive splash in terms of what they did this offseason where it makes you scared away from kind of drafting Puka. Cooper's there, and I like Cooper. And when you look at his contract, yeah, I mean, that dude's making almost $26 million a year, so he's going to continue to stay there. But you'd have to imagine that he's kind of their first option a little bit. When you watch them scheme, even when Cooper Kupp was, back, they schemed a lot of touches to Puka down the stretch and in the red zone. You saw that red zone target share go up too. I guess the one caveat I would say to just his fantasy finishes. So in PPR, he had those great big, he had 3 top 5 weeks. The first, I think it was 7 weeks of the season. Like he looked really phenomenal. But down the stretch, I mean, he had that big week 16 game and he got the targets and they were there, but he didn't really have another top 5 game. He had one top 5 game after that week 7 season. So week 7 week. Now, I'm saying that he did have some 12s and 11s thrown in there, but at this ADP now, you're really looking at, you want that top 7 finish. You're looking for that. And I think that's maybe the one area where I say, hey, can he do that consistently week in and week out? And you probably can when you're thinking about, hey, he's going to get better. We're going to see that. But on the flip side, and a guy that I really can't make excuses for sometimes with the production, but you want to make excuses for him because of who he's played for. He's played for the Jets, and the Jets have not done well at the quarterback position with Zach Wilson being there, and all of the nonsense, especially what happened last year with Aaron Rodgers. And he was still able to put up 95 catches, 1,000 yards, and 3 touchdowns on 163 targets. When you're looking at his target, he had the targets there, but just it was incredible just how bad his quarterback play was. They couldn't give him the football in ways to actually get him the catches. He led the league. I mean, he was pretty closely in the league with 30% target share. So the target share is there for him too. And I think they are very similar in the depth chart. Like when you're looking at Puka and Garrett Wilson, who's going to command the target share, both are going to command the target share. I don't see anybody on the Jet side that's, scares me to take away targets from Garrett Wilson. And it's crazy. He actually led the league in air yards share, 46%. So he was out there with that. And the receiving grade was down a little bit because of that inefficiency from the receptions to target perspective. But I mean, how much do we really blame him, right? I think that's the question of the receiving grade of this narrative with Garrett Wilson is like, hey, Zach Wilson was really, really bad when you're looking at just from a ability to get him the football. And his weekly finishes were, it was bad to kind of put him in there. I mean, the targets were there. It's just the efficiency there. Now, when you're talking about just going forward, I think a couple things that kind of stood out to me when we were going through top 24 wide receiver finishes, he had 9 last year, but he only had 3 touchdowns. So part of me looks at this. He had Wilson, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, all those guys there. Like, that's not great. You have to imagine the touchdowns get pushed up with Aaron Rodgers coming back. And that's really the elephant in the room is like, is Aaron Rodgers healthy? And if he is, I don't see a scenario where he's not Devontae Adams with Aaron Rodgers. I don't see a scenario where he doesn't put up that top 5 kind of numbers this year. But again, when we're talking dynasty, though, you have to look at the two of them. Like, how much do we trust Aaron Rodgers and then on the flip side, Matt Stafford to be there for the next 1, 2, 3 years? Like, they're very limited windows here, I think, because of their quarterbacks. And we all know it drives the quarterbacks. Good quarterback plays there. So what are you looking at? If your build is, hey, win now, maybe you lean Garrett Wilson because you expect Aaron Rodgers to really pepper him there. But who has long-standing value, I think, is the biggest question mark there. But again, from just a depth chart perspective, he's the guy. Mike Williams, I mean, me and Christian like Mike Williams. We've always kind of liked Mike Williams. We can't stay healthy. I mean, he just has not been able to do that. Malachi Corley, people love Malachi Corley. They absolutely love this guy, but I don't see them taking away those targets from him there. The guy that is going to be the second probably target guy on this team is Breece Hall. If we're going to be honest here, he's going to probably have that. But even then, you're looking at Garrett Wilson as kind of being that main guy there. And I think he's in for a huge year. This is going to be his year, I think. I think we were robbed the last couple of years, especially last year, of that huge breakout. But I could see Garrett Wilson being a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy this year.
Yeah, you're looking at the Jets. They were the 4th worst scoring offense last year, and the Rams were the 9th best scoring offense last year. And because when you look at the target share and kind of the discrepancies in the yards and the touchdowns, and that's the big difference. So if you have a more efficient offense, I think there's justification for. I mean, I think you can make a solid case that Garrett Wilson could finish as the wide receiver 1 this year because of how Aaron Rodgers was talking about him last year before the injury, and because we know how Aaron Rodgers treats his wide receiver 1. You have another year of experience, which I think always helps when it comes to Aaron Rodgers and throwing you the football for Garrett Wilson. So when you watch the film, man, he's just an elite separator. He's always been an elite separator, and those are the types of guys that Rodgers likes to feed. So to me, that's a very sound argument saying that you think he could be a top 3 asset. And, that's kind of where before last season, where he was ranked consistently, we were projecting and we were projecting an increase in good quarterback play, and we didn't quite get it last year. I think we'll get it this year. That one video of him Aaron Rodgers hobbling around makes me a little nervous about that, but we'll see.
Hey, listen, that's just a father like me of 3 kids is hurting after getting his kids ready for school. Like, I know Aaron Rodgers doesn't have kids, but that's how I feel. All right. Breaking it down here, picking who we'd rather have in Dynasty moving forward. I think this is a fun conversation because I think they're very similar in all the things we talked about: quarterback, team, maybe play calling leans a little bit with the Rams with McVay, and I get that, but I do think that just the talent, though, I think sides with Garrett Wilson. I think he's more talented player than Puka, and I know Puka Truth is going to be coming at me out in the comments, but I do think Garrett Wilson is the more nuanced and better wide receiver from just a wide receiver perspective. That's been kind of put in an offense that hasn't elevated his play. But where are you leaning here? I'll make you pick first. Where are you leaning here, Garrett or Puka?
I lean Garrett Wilson. The things that make me nervous about that, mainly Nathaniel Hackett, really.
Yeah.
There was the report that it seems like the Jets are simply hoping that Hackett will call a play and Aaron Rodgers will fix it. And that's not a good spot to be in. I do think that Aaron Rodgers has that ability to do those things. I do think that, like I just talked about, that Garrett Wilson is going to get peppered with targets the same way that Puka did last year. I do think that Puka Nacua is a fantastic wide receiver, but from a dynasty perspective, I think you can make a case that Garrett Wilson always has been a little bit ahead of him. Puka Nacua is on like he is a little bit younger than Garrett Wilson, but he's already approaching 24 himself. So he just turned 23. So we're already looking at a little bit older of an asset with a lot of usage on his plate. But as far as 2024 goes, I have them back to back in my
Hmm.
projections. I have Garrett Wilson at wide receiver 7 and Puka Nacua at wide receiver 8. So with that being the case, I'll take Garrett Wilson and hope that Aaron Rodgers can fix the Nathaniel Hackett's offense and turn in a finally really good fantasy football season.
Yeah, I don't think the argument here is a talent perspective because I think Garrett's more talented. I think
Yeah.
a majority of people will say Garrett Wilson is the more talented wide receiver. I think the argument comes in because we were talking about on the last Dynasty show we were doing, me and Leo Pasiga on the channel, we were talking about you want high-powered offenses and you want the offenses to score. But we just talked about LA's offense that was scored. They're a top 10 unit. Garrett, Jets have not been that in his area. So will they be that? So there's more risk on the Garrett Wilson side, I believe. I think that there's a safer floor with Puka Nacua because of where he plays and the system with which he plays in will placate that. But I don't think Cooper Kupp's as done as everybody also thinks he is, and where I think Garrett Wilson can be that guy, and he's the dominant guy in that room and can earn that target share that he has and has those fantasy points. So I'm going to lean Garrett Wilson based on talent. And on the fact that also in that room, the usage is going to be there, target share is going to be there. But where are you guys leaning? Where do you guys think? Do you think Puka is more talented? Maybe you guys do out there. Where are you going with both of these guys from a long-term basis, or even maybe this year and in long term? I think it's still the same answer to me as Garrett Wilson, but maybe you guys think it's kind of a little bit different there. But I'd be interested to see what you got. Throw it in the comments. We love hearing about it. Just keep it respectful out here. If you're not respectful, Christian's going to be coming at you there. But I also want to drop our Patreon. We've had a lot of support on that. We appreciate you guys there. We do Devy draft guides, but we also have a ton of Dynasty content that comes out of there on our Substack, in our sheets. Jay Stein's now here. He's bringing his Dynasty Investor Series over. We're going to be talking about kind of a lot of Dynasty. We have Dynasty rankings and Devy rankings. We just dropped a new feature for our Dynasty rankings in our Dynasty database. So go check that out. You can find it below in the description. You can find it there. It's only $5 a month, man. With inflation, that's like $250. So you can help us out. Give us a sub. Let us know what you guys think there. We appreciate you guys tuning in.